Hello and thanks for staying with Bernama TV as we approach the official celebration of National Journalist Day, better known as Hari Wartawan Nasional, or short in Malaysia for Hawan. I'm sure you've seen the posters all around Kuala Lumpur. It happens this Saturday. We will be speaking to Dr. NOORDIN NOORDIN. He's a Fellow of Psychological Operations at the Center for Media and Information Warfare Studies. I will discuss how to balance ethics and innovation in the age of AI journalism. And later on, Captain AFFENDY RANI, who is also a road safety marshal club activist, and he also does other things with oil and gas. He'll be joining us to talk about the recent GERIK bus crash. The question is this a wake-up call for safer journeys in Malaysia? I'm RATNAM. You're watching The World on Bernama TV. In an age where AI or artificial intelligence is increasingly shaping how news is produced and consumed, questions of ethics and truth, or rather telling in journalism, have never been more urgent. Today we speak with Dr. NOORDIN NOORDIN, Fellow of Psychological Operations from the Center of Media and Information Warfare Studies. And this is to explore how AI is influencing modern journalism and how we can navigate the fine line between innovation and manipulation in this new information landscape. Dr. NIRWANDY, thanks for joining us. He's joining us via our telephone from Kuala Lumpur. I'd like to begin here. How is artificial intelligence reshaping the way information is crafted and consumed in modern journalism? NIRWANDY?
I think it's a good discussion, because we are moving into an era where AI is becoming part of the communication channel, communications engineers, communications promotions, and of course we're talking about journalism and the idea of the ways of how things are being reported. And in journalism, of course, we have to look into the components on how the news is being crafted. But when we have this AI will be trying to expedite and make sure that everything is much more I think it's much more easier for us to comply, prompting what's the best for journalism. But the main important element here is that to understand that on how this AI will affect the journalism, particularly the reporting part, the contents of reportings, and how it will make it better, or we turn into becoming one of the disaster in the elements of journalism. But looking at it more positively, I think this is the thing that we have to endure. This is something that we have to work through, because AI is becoming part of the industry today. Because if you talk about all the industry, including journalism industry, including the reportings of the news and so on, so AI become an integral part of putting up the efforts to make AI as part of what the thing that we're doing today. So in answering that question, I do believe that if we look into AI positively, of course it has some positive effect, but there must be some certain guideline, there must be some certain responsible, there must be some certain ethics, there must be some certain modus operandi in looking into what supposedly to be the best way of conducting using AI in journalism or in any other components of sector, in working any professions. But the most important part is recognizing your challenge, your humanized efforts, and of course looking into what are the components of AI could be an integral part in using it in journalism aspect. And of course,
right. In your view, what are the most pressing ethical concerns when it comes to, let's say, AI-generated news content, especially in influencing public opinion or maybe just shaping narratives? Dr. NIRWANDY?
I think this is a good question, because we're looking into the automations. I think one of the main rising elements of AI now is what we call the automation. Of course, we have the AI that can shape things, that can prompt, that can let us to understand what supposedly we do and what are the main components that can be used by AI. But my rising concern today is, of course, the automations, what we call the generative AI and the automation of AI. We're talking about generative AI, where everything can be generated by using a certain prompt, but we're looking forward, also looking into the automotive elements of AI. So the automotive element of AI is something that more considerably has to be looked into a risky situation when it be used in that kind of automation. For example, we just put up some element and the automation will be to certain platform by automated. This is only by posting automation. So soon you're going to have some automation in a part of, might be crafting a video, automation in putting, scheduling elements of what should be reported. So when this automation comes, the rising concern is that where will be the editorial part on how to look into the fact check, on how to look into the element of disinformation. It might be something that happens to the what have we call one of the known issue situation we have to our national flag, and something that related to any other component that things that might be not aligned to our federal constitution and local negara. So this is the hardest thing because we are looking into LLM, the language learning model of the AI. It might not represent things that we have as what we believe in our federal constitution and local negara, and some ethical guideline or boundary of the media organization component myself.
Right. Now, with the rise of AI in newsrooms, of course, newsrooms around the world are still figuring out how best we can use AI because we can't trust it fully at this stage. Now, that aside, how can the public stay informed and protected against misleading or biased content? And this is, for me, it's a very simple question because it's always going back to staying informed and making sure you're reading. But what is your take on this, Dr. NIRWANDY?
Of course, we are quietly, I would say that we are quite advanced in the context of advanced. What I mean that we have our fact check assistant, we have Senang and My by MCMC, we have the chatbot Alpha by the ministry by SAF. So we have something for public to look into and to refer to. But the most important part of the public needs to have their own form of algorithm audit. So these audit algorithms is how the public need to audit how the algorithm works towards their form of interest. So when the public started to fall into a kind of belief or situations, a bubble of algorithm that comes towards, for example, the fake news, disinformation coming from channels that's not uncertified, for example, not coming from Bernama, the news might be coming some form of the news from other representation of citizen journalism, or the rise of mobile journalism by the citizens. So this gives unethical elements by the public to acknowledge some certain sources without have some form of references. So the public need to at least to have to know where to refer, where is a good news, where is the bad news, how to look into whether it's a truthful news by having their own fact check elements of understanding. And to do this, they need to first acknowledge the existence of their audit algorithm. So they need to audit themselves. So how do they monitor? How do they look into the algorithm by what they tend to believe? But so the most important part is that when we fall into a set of bubble of algorithm, this is the illusion of the social media, whether it's a positive illusion, whether it's negative illusion. So this bubble of algorithm eventually will make us to be more deeper in a form of understanding, and eventually we create some certain sort of obsessions without us realizing that. So this is the rising concern. This is something that the public need to acknowledge. They need to know where do they stand in getting the news. Where do they stand in believing the news? So eventually, this will at least give them some rough idea that they need somehow to do some algorithms to audit themselves by looking to what are the news that organically come to them, and how, whether there are some circumstances, there will be some form of intervention by some certain party to distort the country harmonies, to distort the situations of some certain elements. So the public need to be ready and to acknowledge these all elements of new representation of idea, particularly on the fact checks and of course the algorithm audit, or to look on how to be audited algorithm.
I've got a couple of other questions for you, but I'd really like to move into this area because we're going to be celebrating National Journalist Day, Hari Wartawan Nasional, as it's known here in Malaysia. I guess the thing we are not talking about, and the thing that disturbs me quite a bit, is the fact that we have a generation of people who are not tech savvy, and they are now using AI, whether it's in the simplest form of asking it for information or looking at videos generated by AI. Some of them fall for it. So I'm talking about, so I'm in my mid-50s, and I know people who are my vintage or who are older than me, or people who've come before me, and they look at videos today, and sometimes they look at AI-generated videos, and these videos can come across as real, and they believe what they see. So what would your message, now the question is this, what would your message be to our friends in the media about informing people who are not tech savvy about AI and its dangers?
I think the media need to have a very consistent effort in promoting AI in a good manner and responsibility. So this is what we call the media elements of media need to have to look of the elements of all this PSA campaign to look into the public's awareness or looking into how to get people to maneuver in understanding AI in the boundary and, of course, in the frameworks of our national identity. So what should be the public's element? What should be the public criteria? What should be the public ethics? And this have to be an ongoing effort because we know what, Gerard? Because AI is that fast that we can't play catch up with AI. We need to catch up with the elements of ethical guidelines of AI. So the journalism by itself have to be more responsible, giving public exposure, giving the initiative to public to understand what are the components of AI, what are the ethics of AI, and what are the public responsibility to it. Of course, we have the freedom of speech, Article 10.1, but we also need to put in what are the ethical representation of freedom of speech and understanding AI from the journalism perspective in integrating the people and the public what they need to do when they are moving in the AI generation as well.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. NOORDIN. Always a breath of fresh air for us right here on Bernama. Dr. NIRWANDY NOORDIN, Fellow of Psychological Operations from the Center of Media and Information Warfare Studies. Now, don't forget to watch our special broadcast on the official celebration of National Journalists Day, better known as HAWANA to us, which means Hari Wartawan Nasional in the national language. Prime Minister Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim is scheduled to officiate the ceremony, and hopefully some good announcements will come from there. Apparently, from what we understand, there will be many positive announcements for the benefit of the country's media industry that will be happening over the weekend right here in Kuala Lumpur. I'm off to a quick break. When I come back, we'll discuss how, of course, the world is changing and how we need to look into simple things that we don't look into on a daily basis, which is the way we drive. And what's happened in the last few days has taken the country once again by surprise, and also everyone is now reeling in from it. We'll come back and talk about the accident or the collision in GERIK. This is The World on Bernama TV. Stay with us. 15 lives, mostly students, were lost in the recent GERIK bus crash. Now, the tragedy has reignited long-standing concerns. Why are students traveling on high-risk roads in the middle of the night? Why are there no proper systems in place to manage fatigue, risk, or vehicle conditions? But this also goes beyond just the crash. From bus drivers to motorcyclists, Malaysia faces a deeper challenge: poor road culture, sometimes weak regulation, according to what some people are saying, and a lack of professional driver education. Now, joining us is Captain AFFENDY. He's a safety advocate and he does a lot on transport and also oil and gas. He joins us from the north of Malaysia. Captain AFFENDY, thank you very much for taking time off to be with us. I'd like to begin here. What does the GERIK tragedy expose, not just about a single crash, but about national mindset on transport safety here in Malaysia? Captain?
Hey, thanks, Gerard. Good afternoon, Dan. The GERIK tragedy exposed a deeply concerning truth about Malaysia's national mindset, especially on transport safety. And I can say that we are reactive, we are not preventive. Despite so many incidents involving students, public transport, there are still no mandatory standardized journey risk management, we call it JRM, framework is in place for education, especially for the educational trips. Those involving the high-risk roads and the overnight travels. The safety practices vary widely between institutions, and decisions are often driven by cost, convenience rather than risk. And this tragedy reveals a culture of compliance on the paper, but not in practice. So existing regulation and maintenance, we talk about the vehicle maintenance, the driver rest hours, the seatbelt utilization are weekly enforced. The accountability is diffused, and when an accident happens, we focus on assigning blame rather than fixing the root causes.
Right. I think I want to go to this, something the minister announced, of course, later after this. He did say speed limiters have been proposed. And of course, when you talk about speed limiters, it's not new technology. It's technology that's been there for many years. Are there any genuine solution, or is this just another sound bite we're hearing? I mean, we're looking for something concrete at this point. And also, it always comes back to us when we ask this question as people. And when I get behind the wheel, I need to ask myself the question, am I a pemandu berhema, as we say in Malaysia?
Yeah, good question, Gerard. So for the Greek tragedy, the proposal to install the speed limiters, or we call it hard laju berkomputer, on the buses is a step in the right direction. But on its own, it is not enough and risk becoming a political soundbite without real enforcement and system integration. What it can be effective, the speed limiters physically restrict the vehicle from exceeding a speed limit, and it helps to reduce accident severity, and especially on winding and highly routes like GERIK Jelly Highway. And one thing is, if the pair with tamper-proof technologies and regular JPA or Puspakam inspection, of course, they can save lives. But here's the problem, many speed limiters are easily be bypassed and fully maintained. So there's no real-time monitoring unless, like what one of the few companies, oil and gas, they have IVMS, in vehicle monitoring system, or we call it in Europe, they use tachograph, which can track the violation, the rest time and also the driver behavior. That's very important, how the driver behaves when they drive the vehicle. Yeah.
Right. Let's talk about this tachograph for a while. I don't know if we have the picture of a tachograph. Please explain to us very simply what a tachograph is and why we should be using it.
Yeah, okay. The tachograph is kind of a device that has been implemented in European countries. The tachograph is a device to record the driving time and the brakes and the rest period for drivers. When the drivers engage, especially when they carry passengers on the road. The purpose of the tachograph is to enable the control of compliance. Where they set the requirements, the rule is aimed to prevent the driver fatigue. When the certain driver drives for 12 hours, for example. Some companies, they limit the driving period, so they go up to maximum 12 hours. And it tracks by the device, and it's contribute a good working behavior for the drivers and also for the road safety. And it is mandatory for European countries. So to install the tachograph for vehicle more than 3.5 tons, or those are the transport that carry more than 9% and above, including the driver. So that is how good the system is there.
Right. So we're talking about a tachograph. It is used a lot in Europe, and it's used for vehicles that carry 9 people or anything more than that. So we talked about the tachograph. We talked about speed limiters. Now we can talk about all this, but is it time for us to overhaul how we recruit, train, and even maybe value our commercial drivers and make it a more respected profession? A lot of, and this is just me thinking out loud here. I think that there needs to be a lot of training. Before we get on the airwaves of any TV or radio station, there's a lot of training that one needs to go through. Should it be the same for drivers, be it truck drivers or bus drivers?
Yes, this is long overdue for Malaysia to overhaul how we recruit and train and value our commercial drivers, especially the trucks and the buses. So they are responsible for transporting passengers like students. So it is critical because the process to become a commercial driver for bus express or bus sewa khas, or bus So it is relatively easy, when with the minimal screenings for attitude, fatigue tolerance, or health fitness. Yes, these drivers are untrusted with a dozen life. And number two, we talk about the training is the basics and outdated. Most drivers only go through basic driving tests. There's no structured national curriculum when we talk about defensive driving, because in oil and gas, we practice every 3 years, every 2 years, or every 4 years. They have to undergo defensive driving, emergency handling, and fatigue management. Unlike this in the country with the top tier of the road safety records. So this is the requirement that we put in place for oil and gas companies.
Right.
So
I've got one last question for you. We've got about 2 minutes left. Very quickly, we've built world-class highways, but driving standards remain poor. Now, I think the most simplest way to understand this is there must be a missing link. What, in your opinion, is this missing link?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we built world-class highway in Malaysia, but we're missing link. It's a serious leaking driver discipline, enforcement, consistency, and safety culture of the driver. And so the road condition is sometimes it's okay, and the maintenance of the road, we talk about that. And the real gap behind the poor driving standard is the weak driver education system. That is something that we need to relook back. The driving school in Malaysia are largely focused on helping learners pass the test, not to build the long-term safe driving habits. So this is based on my observation. And there are minimal emphasis on defensive driving, hazard perception, and attitudes on the roads. So these are the elements of education for the drivers. Number two, the poor enforcement of rules. The traffic law exists, but inconsistent enforcement by the authorities weaken the impact. And there's no real deterrence for repeat offenders. Many know that they can break the law with a little consequence, especially affect the citizen. And I can say that there's no culture of accountability, unlike countries where dashcam footage can lead to enforcement action in Malaysia. A report really result in the penalty unless there is a fatality. So and there's no public rating system for buses. We think we know that GERARD have this, but there's no for buses. Some companies practice that, but not throughout the Malaysia. Transport company or even school transport provider. So
Right. Captain, we'll have to leave it there. Captain MS Effendi bin Haji Abdul Rani, a safety activist. Now, if you're thinking, what a terrible thing when we look back at what happened with regards to the tragedy, if you're one of those persons, or if you're a person who's on the highway at times, flashing people off the fast lane, think about it. All of us need to take a look at the way we drive, the way we ride a bike, the way we use our roads in Malaysia. That's a wrap for this hour's broadcast. Don't forget to visit Bernama.com and follow us on our social media channels, YouTube, X, Instagram and Facebook for the latest. You can also receive updates from Bernama Radio. That's if you're driving within the city limits or within the federal capital. This has been The World on Bernama TV. I'm GERARD. Thanks for watching.